I happened to be listening to the radio this morning, and Rush Limbaugh was on, and he was talking about Hillary's poll numbers. They've dropped, and apparently he considers that to be a big problem for Hillary. He was even poking fun at Slate, which had an article making the case that it was not a big deal. And I read through this. I saw these poll numbers. I read through what Politico had to say about it, and they seem to think it's a problem. And Politico seemed to think that it was a problem as she moved from a so-called trusted international charity organizer to a candidate. That the number of people trusting her would fall, and that her campaign people expected that, but not for it to drop that much and that quickly. And then Slate, being a left-leaning publication, tried to downplay it, and Limbaugh seemed to think that that was ignorance of reality on the part of the people over at Slate. And Limbaugh always tries to be so positive about stuff, and actually that's what annoys me. He has said so many times, if you just look around for bits of what he says, that leftism is dead, liberalism is dead, the Republicans are on the rise, and true conservatism is on the rebound. But the last 20 years, if you really look at it realistically, has shown anything but what Limbaugh says. And that's why I think Limbaugh is an idiot. I'm all for thinking positive about things. You'll never get a positive outcome if you don't try to be positive about things. But that isn't an excuse to be unrealistic about stuff. One thing you have to realize about the Clintons is they always seem to come back from the dead. Look at all the trouble, if you read what went on in the Bill Clinton administration, the stuff that happened in his administration would have sunk a lot of people if the same thing had happened to them. And why would you expect it any different with Hillary? Those two have a real knack for coming back from the grave. And I wouldn't count them out. And you have to look at our nation too. Our nation is not what it had been. We're a people that elected Barack Obama, junior senator from Illinois, which the only thing he'd done before that is been a community organizer. And we elect him not once, but twice. We look like fools in front of the entire world, and rightly so. Why wouldn't we vote for Hillary? See, I'm not as optimistic as someone like Limbaugh. I do think the man is so foolishly optimistic. Like I said, he said, liberalism is dead. It's something we don't have to worry about. That socialism is dead. We should keep a socialist on every campus so we never forget who they are. Only problem is that the left is incredibly well organized. And that's what got Obama into office, is that they are very well organized. These are very well organized and dangerous people. And they are undermining our freedoms. And Hillary is part and parcel of that. And I'm concerned about that. I hope she isn't president, or someone like Elizabeth Warren, who is just about the same, perhaps even more radical than Hillary. But the left is very well organized. They know how to get this stuff done. It is how Bill was elected. It's how Hillary could very well be. And I'm not willing to be as optimistic as Limbaugh. I really do think the man's a fool for being that optimistic about this stuff all the time. Now, he has a brother, David Limbaugh. Now, if you read his columns, David Limbaugh's not on the radio. He's a columnist. He writes op-ed pieces, but he is much more realistic about this. He is not nearly as optimistic. He understands that the left is very well organized. And if you look at what the left has done over the past 20 years in America, even though George Bush was president, but still, the left has made a huge headway these past 20 years in America. And it has really accelerated under Obama. All of the good stuff that Reagan did to reduce taxes and lessen the impact of government in our lives has been undone and then some since Reagan left office. That is a frightening thought. Reagan was a good president. He had the right ideas about things. Now, the only mistake he really made was believing the left on this immigration policy stuff. And that's a mistake we're about to make again. We don't need to be giving people amnesty again. The deal that Reagan made on amnesty also included closing the borders down so we didn't have millions of people coming in. Well, we have millions of people here again, illegally. That's a road we don't need to be going down again. But that is part of the left strategy too. And that's something that Ann Coulter is really trying to bring home to people. And I hope people listen to Ann Coulter. We can't afford this unrestricted immigration. I mean, going back to Ted Kennedy, it was basically a Democrat voter importation plan. They want voters. They just bring them in if they aren't going to win. That's why they're trying to accelerate this now. That's why they're trying to sneak this in about getting this amnesty done before Obama leaves office. They want more people to vote Democrats, which means to some extent they must be scared that they aren't going to win. But still, I wouldn't count them out. And, you know, but back to, back to Limbaugh though. He is so optimistic about this stuff. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with being optimistic, but it does need to be tempered by realism. And I really do think that Limbaugh needs to understand, like his brother does, of how well organized the left is in this country and really how much damage they're doing because they are more organized than the right. And I don't know what the answer is. I don't know how the right wing can become just that organized. We tend to be more individualistic. And we, by our nature, aren't collectivists. So, I mean, there's a problem with how do we organize to the extent the left has. And I think that we as Americans really are not angry enough at our government. I think if we really understood the true dangers involved here, we'd be a lot more angry than we are. And I hear it from time to time where an elected official, and it's usually on the left, will say something like, "Oh, this unreasoned anger against politicians." It's not unreasoned anger when politicians are totally ignoring the Constitution. That's something we need to be angry about. I don't think we have nearly enough anger toward our government. I think we're clueless about what our government is really trying to do. The Supreme Court doesn't even care about the Constitution. Their rulings, many of them, blatantly fly in the face of the Constitution. I believe that we aren't more angry at our government. It shows that we just do not have the ethical fiber that we have had in the past. I'm angry that we seem so cavalier about what's going on in our country, with the huge sacrifice it took to establish this country and to maintain the freedoms of this country. And we are just flushing it away. Even the Republicans are siding with Obama on this trade pact, and no one knows what's in that. That's another thing from the Obama administration, that no one knows what is in it. It's a bill, a law, a potential law, and the public can't even see what's in it. Now, does that sound like even vaguely like the American way of governing? With Hillary collecting all this money from foreign governments, with Obama pushing these laws through, and the opposition party siding with someone like Obama, we're acting like a banana republic here. That's how corrupt we've become. How can someone like Limbaugh be such a fool as to be optimistic when this kind of stuff is going on? This is the most serious threat that we've ever faced. This threat is literally more serious than Nazi Germany. And I was thinking of it too, that I mean, this isn't at the federal level, but Governor Scott Walker from Wisconsin, he was very successful at beating the left back, undoing the power of public employee unions that are bleeding so many states dry, including my state in California. That's another topic, but I'll say this shortly, is that the public employee unions in Stockton, California, that city was bankrupt. The city itself was in bankruptcy court, and the reaction of the police and employee unions was there was no concern that their community was in bankruptcy court. They just wondered how it would affect their retirement packages. Public servants, right? But back to Scott Walker. So I mean, it shows that Scott Walker was right to ring them in when you look at what's happening in California with the public employee unions. Because, Governor Scharzenegger, when he was in office, that's one of the things that he said he'd do, is rein in the public employee unions. But as soon as Scharzenegger was in office, he backed off of that promise about as quickly as you can imagine. Now, whether he ever meant it or not, but if he did, apparently he realized how powerful they were when he was actually in office. You consider that. They are just as powerful, if not more so, in Wisconsin. But Scott Walker actually had the courage to lessen their power. And the taxpayers in Wisconsin really did thank him for that. That's why he survived those recalls. But the left plays dirty pool. And this is instructive, even though it's at the state level in Wisconsin, but they're just as corrupt as the types like Hillary are. And the I think it's a DA from Milwaukee, and I remember his name is Chisholm, and you can look this up, but he actually raided people's houses overnight under these John Doe investigations in Wisconsin. And they, these John Doe investigations, they don't even have to name a specific person and they can investigate them. And there's a little bit of a twist on these John Doe investigations that not only can't law enforcement talk about who's being investigated, but the person being investigated can't. And so these people, that they show up in the middle of the night, the neighbors come out. How can they not talk about it? But it was all political payback because Chisholm's wife was part of the power structure of the public employee unions in that state. And she just took that so personally that these John Doe investigations were going on and were targeting Scott Walker supporters. Now, Scott Walker survived his recalls, but, people that were just basically everyday people that supported Scott Walker were targeted over this. And that's why these John Doe investigations should not be allowed in America. And when you go in Third Reich, and that it really is like the Third Reich, that you go into these people's houses and search through their stuff and make a real mess of things and embarrass them in front of their neighbors. And it's just to show that they can do that. And it's just hassling people. It's interfering with people. It's harassment of people for their political views. And that is not right. That is not American. But see, that's the kind of stuff Scott Walker was up against. But that is why, I think he would be tough enough to be president and undo some of this destructive stuff the left has done. And I'd like to hope he genuinely has come around on the immigration issue. He seems to have, because that's another sticking point that we just can't be allowing that. But I'm not going to hold my breath on this as far as Hillary goes. That I fully expect that she could come back from these decreasing poll numbers, these decreasing approval numbers, because she has a lot of money behind her and a lot of people behind her, and she has the idiot American voters that put Obama in office twice. I wouldn't doubt that we'd put her in office twice. And yeah, people say they don't trust her, but there's still a lot of people willing to vote for her. And I just think it's ridiculously optimistic just to say, well, her poll numbers are going down and, everything's sunny in the garden again. I'm not going to believe that for a minute. I hope she's done for, but I really don't think so.